He slept with a nun with help from her brother, who was a church official. He experienced intimacy with 3 sisters simultaneously, with their mother's support, and escaped from Italy's harshest prison alongside his priest companion. Casanova, the man whose name became synonymous with seduction, never let a woman who caught his eye slip through his grasp. His exploits were not confined to Italy, but extended to several other countries. Who was Casanova? How did he win the admiration of so many women, rendering them unable to resist his charm? How did he infiltrate the ecclesiastical world and its nuns? What's the story behind the berry juice he used as ink to escape prison? Who was the woman who posed a challenge to him? And what were the other strange relationships he pursued? Casanova was born in Venice to a modest family. His mother, Zanetta Ferrucci, was an actress, and his father, Gaetano Casanova, was also an actor. Raised in an artistic environment, he initially received a religious education before studying law at the University of Padua. However, he soon abandoned traditional professions to lead a life of adventure, traveling between Venice, Paris, London, and other European cities. Casanova was known for his intelligence, charm, and communication skills, which enabled him to influence both nobles and commoners alike. His romantic escapades were an integral part of his life, but they were not mere whims. They often intertwined with a complex web of social and economic relationships. Casanova did not view himself as a predator or exploiter. Rather, he described his relationships as the result of mutual understanding and attraction, though this perspective reflects his subjective viewpoint. Casanova's memoirs are filled with stories that can be described as strange due to their social context, the nature of the relationships, or the surrounding circumstances. Among these stories are relationships with women from different classes. Casanova did not limit himself to one social class. He engaged with nobles, actresses, maids, and even nuns, giving his adventures a diverse character. There are also instances of concurrent relationships. In several cases, Casanova managed multiple affairs simultaneously, leading to complex situations, such as his involvement with 3 sisters, to be discussed later. Some of his stories involve forbidden or unconventional relationships, including affairs with married women, or situations marked by significant age or power imbalances, introducing a degree of moral ambiguity. Additionally, some adventures took place in unusual contexts, incorporating disguises, prison escapes, or deception, all employed to achieve his romantic goals. One of the most notable stories in Casanova's memoirs concerns his relationship with a woman often referred to as M.M., a nun connected to his friend, a priest, possibly his sister or a close relative. This story, which took place in Venice around 1753, is among Casanova's most controversial and peculiar adventures. During this period, Casanova was at the height of his youth and vigor. Having returned to Venice after adventures in Europe, he formed a friendship with a priest referred to in his memoirs as C.C. Initials were used to protect identities. This priest introduced Casanova to a young woman, M.M., a nun in a convent on the nearby island of According
Murano.
to Casanova, M.M. was beautiful and intelligent, but lived in the isolation of the convent, which made her curious about the outside world. The relationship began with secret correspondence, with the priest acting as a messenger. These exchanges evolved into clandestine meetings, with Casanova sneaking into the convent or arranging encounters in private locations. According to his memoirs, M.M. was a willing partner, eager to experience love and adventure beyond the constraints of convent life. What makes this story strange is its religious and social context. A relationship with a nun was strictly forbidden at the time, and could have led to a major scandal if discovered. Casanova describes using his intelligence and skill in disguise to facilitate these meetings. In one instance, he recounts arranging for M.M. to temporarily leave the convent for a rendezvous at a private residence. The priest's involvement adds another layer of complexity. According to the memoirs, he was aware of Casanova's relationship with M.M. and even helped arrange their meetings, raising questions about his motives. Was he seeking vicarious pleasure, or was he helping his sister, or relative, fulfill her desire for freedom? The memoirs offer no clear answer, but depict a complex dynamic among the three, with the priest acting as a mediator. Casanova mentions a figure referred to as Monsieur de Bernis, the French ambassador to Venice at the time, who played a role in this relationship. In some accounts, Casanova hints at moments of unconventional emotional or physical interactions involving himself, M.M., and the priest, possibly including the ambassador as an observer or indirect participant. These details, as narrated by Casanova, might be considered unconventional by 18th century standards, where relationships involving multiple partners or non-traditional roles were rare and socially risky. Another striking and unusual story in Casanova's memoirs involves his relationship with three sisters in Venice, often referred to as Nanetta and Marta Savona, though pseudonyms were used. This episode, occurring around 1754, exemplifies the complex, multi-layered relationships Casanova managed. Casanova met three sisters living with their mother in Venice. The sisters were young, beautiful, and from a relatively modest family, making them susceptible to Casanova's charm and promises. Their mother, aware of her daughter's relationships with Casanova, did not object and may have encouraged them, possibly hoping Casanova would provide financial or social support for the family. According to the memoirs, Casanova began a relationship with the eldest sister, referred to as Nanetta, which later expanded to include the middle sister, Marta, and eventually the youngest. Casanova describes these relationships as somewhat concurrent, spending time with the sisters individually, sometimes in the same household. The peculiarity lies in the mother's implicit approval and the sisters' apparent awareness of each other's relationships with Casanova without significant objection. According to the memoirs, Casanova began a relationship with the eldest sister, referred to as Nanetta, which later expanded to include the middle sister, Marta, and eventually the youngest. Casanova describes these relationships as somewhat concurrent, spending time with the sisters individually, sometimes in the same household. The peculiarity lies in the mother's implicit approval and the sisters' apparent awareness of each other's relationships with Casanova without significant objection. The mother played a pivotal role in this story. Casanova portrays her as a pragmatic woman, possibly seeing him as an opportunity to improve her family's financial situation. In some accounts, he suggests she encouraged her daughters to maintain good relations with him, perhaps due to his gifts or promises of support. This reflects the 18th century social reality, where relationships with wealthy or influential men were sometimes seen as a means to elevate a family's status. The strangeness of this story lies in Casanova's simultaneous relationships with three sisters, which he claims to have managed with remarkable balance and discretion. Even more surprising is the apparent approval of their mother, whose encouragement of the affair was highly unusual, even for that time. Adding to the peculiarity are the family dynamics themselves. The sisters seem to be aware of one another's involvement, suggesting an unexpected level of mutual acceptance or tolerance. Casanova recounts this episode with a blend of pride and disbelief, presenting it as one of his most intricate and exhilarating experiences. Still, as with much of his writing, there's reason to suspect he may have embellished certain details to reinforce his image as an irresistible and masterful lover. Among the many relationships documented in Casanova's autobiography, Story of My Life, Histoire de ma vie, his encounter with a woman named Henriette stands out as one of the most challenging, not only due to her beauty or intelligence, but because of the emotional and intellectual complexity she brought into his life. Casanova met Henriette in the mid-18th century during his travels in Europe, likely in France. She was distinguished not only by her striking beauty, but also by her intellectual independence and sharp wit, setting her apart from many women who easily succumbed to his charm. Casanova describes Henriette as uniquely capable of discerning his true intentions, making him feel he was not entirely in control of the relationship, as he was accustomed to being. She challenged him with her questions and demeanor, unsettling him as he was used to women yielding readily to his allure. Moreover, Henriette's strong moral sense led her to resist fully surrendering to him, which both fascinated and frustrated him. At one point, Casanova felt she nearly dominated him emotionally, a rare experience for a man who prized freedom over deep emotional attachment. Casanova describes Henriette as uniquely capable of discerning his true intentions, making him feel he was not entirely in control of the relationship, as he was accustomed to being. She challenged him with her questions and demeanor, unsettling him as he was used to women yielding readily to his allure. Moreover, Henriette's strong moral sense led her to resist fully surrendering to him, which both fascinated and frustrated him. At one point, Casanova felt she nearly dominated him emotionally, a rare experience for a man who prized freedom over deep emotional attachment. Unlike many of his fleeting romantic escapades, his relationship with Henriette had a more serious tone, causing an internal conflict between his desire for freedom and his admiration for her. Ultimately, Henriette chose her own path, leaving Casanova with the memory of a woman he could not fully control, making her one of the most challenging women he ever encountered. This relationship, as he described it, taught him the limits of his charm and influence. Casanova's escape from Venice's Piombi prison in 1756 is one of the most thrilling adventures of his life, documented in great detail in his memoirs, resembling a cinematic hero's tale. He was imprisoned in Piombi, located beneath the roof of the Doge's palace, on charges related to offending religion and morality, likely tied to his scandalous behavior and rumored involvement in forbidden activities like magic and alchemy. Casanova spent about 15 months in a cramped, dark cell, a period he described as giving him time to reflect on his mental ailments. But he was determined to regain his freedom at any cost. Casanova began planning his escape months into his imprisonment, leveraging his sharp intellect and ability to seize opportunities despite harsh conditions. He discovered that his cell was above the investigators' rooms, meaning digging through the floor could lead to an exit. Using a sharp metal tool, possibly obtained from a guard or during a transfer, he began carefully digging through his cell's floor, hiding the debris to avoid detection. He planned his escape for August 28, 1756, during Venice's St. Augustine Festival, when the investigators' rooms were likely empty. 3 days before the planned date, Casanova was unexpectedly moved to a larger, better-lit cell at the recommendation of a former patron, initially frustrating him as it disrupted his plan. However, he adapted to the new circumstances. In the new cell, he discovered a priest, Father Marino Balbi, imprisoned above him. Communicating through exchanged books, Casanova used berry juice as ink to write secret messages on the pages. He proposed a joint escape plan, asking the priest to dig a hole through his cell's floor, Casanova's ceiling, so they could work together. The priest agreed and began digging with makeshift tools. After weeks of painstaking work, the priest created a hole large enough for Casanova to climb into his cell. They faced a new challenge when another prisoner was placed in Casanova's cell, increasing the risk of discovery. Casanova, with his cunning, kept the situation under control, either by distracting the new prisoner or convincing him to stay silent. Once the hole was complete, Casanova joined the priest in his cell, located directly beneath the palace's lead roof. Using rudimentary tools, they painstakingly pierced the lead roof, a process that took hours due to the material's toughness and the need for silence. After breaching the roof, they faced another obstacle, descending from the palace's height to the ground. They fashioned a rope from knotted bed sheets to reach the ground. With the priest and the other prisoners' help, Casanova escaped through the roof and out of the palace. The final moments were tense, as they had to evade guards and navigate Venice's streets at night without being detected. Casanova successfully fled Venice, heading to Parma, where he began a new chapter of his adventures. In his memoirs, Casanova expressed immense pride in this achievement, describing it as proof of his intelligence and courage. He detailed the prison's harsh conditions, including extreme cold and darkness, and how his determination for freedom drove him to overcome these challenges. Some have questioned the story's authenticity due to its cinematic details, such as using berry juice as ink and digging through a lead roof. But it remains one of his most iconic adventures, showcasing his intelligence, boldness, and perseverance. Piombi prison was notorious for its harsh conditions, and escaping it was considered nearly impossible. Casanova's success made him a legend in his time, enhancing his reputation as an unparalleled adventurer. This event was not just a tale of escape, but a reflection of Casanova's refusal to submit to constraints, whether physical or social. To understand Casanova's adventures, they must be placed in the context of 18th century Europe. Venice, in particular, enjoyed relative social freedom compared to other cities. Carnivals, parties, and disguises were part of daily life, facilitating unconventional relationships for figures like Casanova. However, strict moral and religious constraints made his exploits risky. From a 21st century perspective, many of Casanova's adventures may seem ethically questionable, particularly those involving power imbalances, such as his relationships with the nun or the three sisters. However, he operated within a different cultural framework, where romantic and sexual relationships were often influenced by economic and social considerations. For instance, the mother's approval of her daughter's relationships may have been driven by financial need rather than moral acceptance. Casanova was not merely a seducer, but a complex figure combining intelligence, curiosity, and a desire to push societal boundaries. His memoirs portray him as a philosopher of love, not a predator, though the accuracy of his accounts remains debated as he aimed to captivate his readers. Casanova's adventures, particularly those involving his friend's sister, the nun, and the three sisters, are striking examples of his complex and contradictory life. His relationship with M.M. demonstrates his ability to manipulate social and religious constraints, while his affair with the three sisters reflects his skill in navigating intricate emotional and social dynamics. These stories, though strange, also illuminate the cultural context of his era, where the boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable were often blurred.